Hey there, welcome to another episode of Adventist Asia Podcast. And I'm your host, Tony Stanier, and I'm really excited today because I get to sit down or stand with one of my good friends, Bledi. But before that, I would just want you to introduce yourself and what is your role in leadership for the Adventist Church.
Well, hello, Adventist Asia. Tony hasn't told you, but we look so much alike. We're brothers, actually.
Yeah, my brother.
Yeah. Thank you, Tony, for having me for this podcast. What I do for the church, I'm very excited to do that. The newly appointed director for Global Mission Urban Center, Centers of Influence and Mission to the Cities.
What's the difference between the urban centers and the term mission to the cities?
Sure. So Mission to the Cities is a initiative, and it's worldwide, and actually it involves all the levels of the church, all the departments, all the ministries of the church. It's actually a focus that we're trying to give to all the ministries to develop, to activate the ministries in the cities, in the large urban centers of the world. So that's the umbrella, right? Global Mission Urban Center deals more specifically with developing those ministries, establishing centers of influence, as well as establishing new groups of believers and church planting in cities. So it's specifically to do the work in the great cities in the world.
Yeah. Of course, you and I have been friends for some time, and we met in New York. I can remember as if it was yesterday, you and I were running around New York with Pastor Kaderma, who's now our president, showcasing the ecosystem or the urban mission ecosystem. Could you help us understand what makes this ecosystem that support the Mission to the Cities initiative?
Yeah. So living in a city, for those of you who live in cities, you know this, is very fast-paced, is fun, but it's also a little difficult because you have a lot of things going on. Life in the city is complicated, but it's also very complex. So in order to reach someone who lives in a city, an urbanite, we also have to think of that complexity of life reflected in the ways that we do ministry, in the ways that we reach out to them. So hence we come up with this term of an ecosystem. Just as in nature, you have an ecosystem and you have all different forms of life and all this, little entities and life forms spread out, and somehow they work together, they survive together, one helping the other to survive. We are reflecting that same metaphor we're using that metaphor in doing ministry in the city. So because life is complex in the cities, then we need also a complex way, not a complicated way, but a variety, an array of ministries that people in the city can connect to.
Yeah, as this ecosystem is thriving, as Christians and Seventh-day Adventists, we try to fill in the gap in this ecosystem, or we supply something to this ecosystem that allows us to introduce Jesus to that society.
Well, it truly is just opening our horizons a little bit to doing multifaceted ministry. We're typically used to emphasizing certain ways of doing outreach. For instance, public evangelism, or
quite common.
or for instance, going door to door, doing colporting, or things like that. And so we're saying we have to continue to do those things, but we just have to open up a little bit the array and the variety of kinds of ministries that we do, especially because cities nowadays are just growing and growing year after year. And urban centers are one of the three windows that the World Church is giving emphasis.
Okay.
So it's the 1040 window that, for a long time, for a few years now, since the 90s, we've been talking about it. The challenge is still great. We are right here. This part of the world is part of the 1040 window. The other window is the postmodern, post-Christian, secular.
Yeah, I heard that.
Because that's how the majority of, including the majority of the cities, people in the cities are growing and growing towards that trend. And the third is the urban centers, because honestly, most of the people in the world, they live in a city. 55% of the world's population, that is 4.6 billion people. That's a lot of people. And the choices that they're making is to live in cities. Many of them live in rural areas, but because of the opportunities that the cities afford, we are seeing this trend worldwide where people are just flocking around urban centers and making them even bigger. So as the cities grow, the challenge also grows.
We have churches in these cities, and Mission to the Cities is this buzzword. How can the church integrate and be part of this initiative of Mission to the Cities?
So it's a good thing that a Mission to the Cities is a buzzword and has been a buzzword for a while, because it shows that, hey, we are coming to terms with the challenge, but now we really have to go on to the next phase, which is to strategize. And so from an organizational level, it's good that we keep on talking about these things, because we are exposing ourselves and our brothers and sisters, wherever they are, to these terms, but not just the term, really to the strategies. But this won't exist if, as a Seventh-day Adventist Christian, if I don't get engaged to doing something personally and collectively in my community, through my church, through my group of believers, to reaching out to the city. The way I see it, the way actually the Bible sees it, is that we have to bring the prosperity, the peace, what the Bible uses this word in Hebrew, shalom. So it's to bring the shalom to the city, which is the full flourishing of all areas of life. So as a Seventh-day Adventist disciple, I'm not going to say member, because we're called to be disciples and not members.
That's right.
We can be members at gyms, but not at the church. We're disciples. So as a Seventh-day Adventist disciple, we have to ask ourselves, how is my neighborhood a better neighborhood because I live there? How can I make it a better, safer neighborhood because I'm there? How is my apartment building a better apartment building because I live there and I am bringing the shalom, I'm bringing the full flourishing I'm bringing God to where God is needed more. And so that is the engagement that I'd like to challenge our fellow disciples, Adventist disciples, to do. Get engaged, to get involved in your city, in your community. And that's how we can start with the small changes that will multiply and replicate and change even greater things in society.
Yeah, I like how you put it, that it's mission of the cities is actually more of the personal mindset, and we participating as a church in the society, impacting culture. Are there tools or resources that our church disciples. or Adventist disciples can read up on to expand and to maybe have examples of how they could reach out in their local communities?
There are plenty, and I'd encourage everyone to visit this websites. Most of them are in English, but there are also material there and resources that have been translated into other languages, and we're also working alongside with you to make sure that we reach as many people as possible. But you can go to missiontothecities.org, one word, and you will see a lot of stories there that will inspire you, a lot of success stories around the world of how people are actually enacting this idea of me being a missionary in my own city, in my own community. So check that out. You will see also other resources, not only success stories, but you will also see some stories that will bring a challenge, and how the pioneers or the disciples, they were able to resolve that, to find a solution to that. So missiontothecities.org, and another important resource is urbancenters.org.
Gotcha. So with those resources, I know that there's opportunities for them to maybe expand their frame of thinking. Do they need permission? Maybe they may have their own ideas right now. Do they have to have permission to be part of this initiative?
Well, they certainly don't need permission. We're being called to reach our communities, to preach the gospel, to give the good news to the world. But we also provide resources so that those who might have an idea, but they may want to refine it and to debate or pick someone's brain, so to speak. So there is that platform where you can be inspired, but you can also ask questions. How do I get this done? For instance, if you have an idea about a community that you want, a community ministry that you want to develop, or a center of influence, for instance, you can brainstorm with your team. You can brainstorm with your pastor, go to your local conference, find that person in the conference that leads this initiative about global mission or mission to the cities, and speak to them. You also go on these websites, and you see there, you will see a lot of resources that are available to you. You'll see forms that you can fill out. You can see, for instance, how to write grants, how to petition for grants, even with the church organization coming from the general conference to your local division, to your local union, to your local conference, and your local church even. Once you have all those resources, then you can start planning and strategizing and start writing your proposal. So it really starts at the grassroots level. Anyone can say, hey, I want to explore this more. So here are the stories that you can be inspired. Here are some examples. And here are, on this websites that we mentioned, here are also some resources that you can use. So putting all those together, going to the right people. Remember, conference, and then the conference will involve the union, and the union will involve the division will come to the GC. Why do we do that? Because we want everyone to understand how important it is to support one another, not just with finances, with the funds, with the grants, but also with ideas, also with the inspiration that goes behind it, and also the support that goes behind it. Once the project is up and running, you always need someone to be there for you, to counsel, to advise. There will be difficult times, challenging times, so you have that network of support around you that will push you to go forward.
Yeah, I see there's a great amount of involvement of the whole church. It's not just a one-man team. What are some examples that you've been to or that you've seen and you helped put together and it proved out to be something more and actually benefit the community? Do you have a sample of that?
Yeah, well, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because we as Seventh-day Adventists, when the church started, when the church was founded, it was founded by entrepreneurs. All of our pioneers and founders, they were entrepreneurs. What does it mean? What it means is that they had a business, or they ran a business, or they had a vocation or a job. They developed it, they worked it, they survived through it, but they used it also, their business and their entrepreneurship, for mission. They wanted to reach more and more people through their professional vocation. And so I would encourage many here in Asia to do that. One of the examples, that is actually a local example from here, from this division, is the beautiful work that they do in Indonesia, for instance, with the Club Sehat. Am I saying it right?
I think
Yes,
so.
okay.
Yeah. Club Sehat.
Well, they will correct me if
Yes.
I'm not.
Yeah.
But and Club Sehats are a perfect model of centers of influence. They're actually making a change and influencing the community for the better, to live a healthier life. But they're also a perfect example of how someone can use their entrepreneurship and their business to not just to make money and to survive, but to also use their business for mission in places that, for instance, as a pastor, I wouldn't be able to go and to connect as well with people as when you're running a business and you're an entrepreneur.
Yeah. And I think that's the beauty of starting with yourself or starting with your idea, gathering the support of your community and building something that impacts that local community. I think for me, in our experience together of doing, visiting different places, I often hear a perspective of, I need to have a certain level of mindset, or I have to have a certain amount of training, when in fact, you just noticing the needs in your community and starting from there is a great place to start.
That's right.
Is there something you can share with those who are watching that could inspire them, or you challenge them to think about how they can improve their local community and make it an avenue through their business or through them going to school, wherever they're working, that they can not just make evangelism, but make it as a part of their lifestyle in making a center of influence, whether it's a building or it's their family or their local community.
Yeah. So I would say start with one of three steps. Step number one, start praying. Start praying for your community, start praying for your neighborhood, start praying for your city. One of the things that you can do is take prayer walks. The area of the neighborhood or of the city where you want this ministry to be established, this new group of believers, this center of influence to be established, start praying for them. Every city, every community has its challenges and difficulties to be reached. But there's nothing difficult for God. And he tells us in Jeremiah that that's what we have to do for our cities. We have to pray for our cities. Second, I would say, get to know your community. Get to know your city. It doesn't matter what you think is best for the city, for your community, for your neighborhood. You have to see what needs are you meeting. So every ministry has to meet a real need.
Correct.
But in order for you and I to understand what their real need is, we need to get to know the community. So spend time in your community. One of the ways that back home, I live in New York, one of the ways that I do that is I commit to going and doing as much things as I can in the community where we're planting. where we're starting a new group of believers or we're planting a church. Doing groceries in that community, going and visiting the local shops and the local cafes and the local restaurants as much as you can. You can also use your money in a way that is missional, meaning by spending that money there, you are blessing that community because you're wanting to get to know that community more. So get to know what their needs are. Be there. You don't have to spend money. Just be present there and get to know the people in the community. Every community has what they call the gatekeepers. So get to identify those people in the city or in the neighborhood where you are, because they will help you. And then third, I would say organize a ministry that is meeting an actual need in that community, in that city, that is actually answering a question, not your own question, but the question that the community is asking. And make sure that you surround yourself with people that are like-minded. Pray that God will cross your paths as well. But remember that it's all about the team. So surround yourself with people that have different gifts than you have, because you will complete and they will complete you. And that way we can walk together. Like they say, it's an African proverb, right? If you want to go quickly, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together.
Right. Thank you, Bledi, for your time. Thank you for being with us here in Bangkok. And I just want to remind the viewers that we have checking out this podcast that Mission of the Cities is about intentionality, the way that we live our lives in the city. Often we can maybe distance ourselves, that I'm all alone or I separate myself from other people. But if we really truly want to reach out to the community and share God's love, we have to be intentional about it. So until the next podcast, we'll see you guys.